Hey, Forward Talk. I know it's been a while since we've done anything, but I wanted to take the opportunity to get with my friend Adrian Sanford and talk about one of our favorite preachers. And there's one thing I've noticed about preachers that I think are really good preachers is they love to listen to really good preaching. And Adrian Sanford is one of those guys that I think is an excellent preacher. He's preached for us on a number of occasions and has always blessed the congregation. And so we're excited to have you with us today.
Well, man, I'm excited to be on. I have always enjoyed watching your videos on here. And so this is definitely a highlight of mine to be with you.
Thank you, sir. And I will have PayPal or Cash App or whatever links that Evangelist Sanford has available for giving. If anyone would like to support his ministry, he is a tremendous evangelist, and I know it would be a blessing to him and his family if any of you would feel the need to support his ministry. That would be awesome. So we are here today to talk about J.W. Arnold, Uncle Jay, Uncle Jeffrey.
Godfather.
Do I?
The Godfather.
Yeah, the godfather of preaching. And the impact that he has had on Pentecostal preaching, definitely a unique flavor and style of delivery that that was new whenever he broke onto the preaching scene in Pentecost.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard sermons that he's preached. I'm sure others have as well, of how he would write his sermon notes on a napkin,
Yeah,
or I've even heard him make the reference at his home church in the past that he's preached numerous conferences with just a tiny piece of paper and about two or three scriptures,
yeah.
and preach an hour and 15 minutes. And
With
so it's
revelatory
definitely
content.
unique.
Yeah, with revelatory content. And
Right.
I wrote a college paper about him a year or so ago, and I think we came up with the phrase revelatory preaching in an
Yes.
attempt to describe Jeff Arnold. He
That's
is
that's
it
the only way to describe him.
it's the only way to describe him. And not only the revelatory nuggets that he derives from scripture and the connections that he makes between verses and concepts and ideas that are all throughout scripture is just fascinating. But then his Brooklyn person, that New York personality
Yeah.
and lingo that comes through, he can be considered by some as very crass and rude and whatever.
Right. But I think that's what makes him Jeff Arnold.
That's right.
Um,
I
you
wouldn't
know,
want to hear him any other way.
no, I mean, of course, you go for the revelation he's going to
Yeah.
bring, uh, but
But the
a part
pizzazz
of you,
doesn't hurt either.
a part of you goes to see what he's going to say, also.
Exactly. See what he's
So,
going to say outside of scripture.
right.
Pardon me for my congestion and stuff, but so I guess the place that he's preached messages that have become the most watched, heard, well known is at a conference in Alexandria, Louisiana called Because of the Times, or BOT for short. And
Right.
man, he has preached messages at Because of the Times that has absolutely been pivotal messages at very key points in my life. And I don't think I'm the only one that
No,
has that testimony.
no, I grew up with parents who went to Because of the Times almost every year. And I remember them coming home, and if they were going to bring home back then VHS tapes of Bot,
Yeah,
uh, you could guarantee one of them would be Jeff Arnold's.
yeah,
And so I grew up uh, listening to him almost extensively. And of course, through the years, technology has changed, and now you can, you know, find almost anything on YouTube.
yeah.
But yeah, he was definitely a staple of that conference, and for several years, closed out the conference.
Yeah.
In my estimation, rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because of the impact that he had, and you knew when he walked to that pulpit,
He had a word from the
made the
Lord.
statement, "I've heard from the Lord." You knew that he had.
I have heard from God.
Yeah,
Oh,
and you knew he did.
absolutely. It was evident from the content to the from the passion and just the change in the atmosphere when he began to communicate the word of the Lord that he had indeed heard from God. Now
Yeah.
you are a master of Jeff Arnold bot quiz. And so what year did
I've watched him a time or two.
I was I was preaching for a friend of mine a number of years ago, and he put in some Jeff Arnold tapes, and I was just videos, and I was just sitting there saying the sermon right along with him because
Oh yeah,
you knew what was
yeah.
coming next. Yeah. So what year
There's
did because of
several that I could do that.
what year did because of the time start?
I think it was in '83.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, Jeff Arnold's first bot message was a formula for a cloudburst.
Cloudburst. Yep. Formula for cloudburst.
Yep.
And in '84, um, I don't even know if the sermon is still available to find online, but several years ago, I found it. The audio wasn't very well, but he preached in '84, uh, seeing through spiritual eyes.
Yeah.
And that's one that is hardly ever mentioned, I guess, because it's not available. But it was, classic Jeff Arnold as well.
I've heard it, but it's been years and years and
Yeah.
years since I've heard it.
Right.
But when I when I think of Jeff Arnold messages, there's probably about three
Yeah.
that pop into my head immediately, and that
I
is
could probably name it.
miracle looking for a vessel,
Yeah.
refuge from despair, and coming out of the cave.
Yeah. Well, coming out of the cave, I figured you would have said, "I will not die in my dilemma."
Yeah, that
But
one's awesome too. That
coming
would
out
have
of the cave
been
was great.
that would have been four,
Yeah.
but coming out of the cave was incredible.
And what's crazy is he preached all three of those sermons within 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just churning them out every year.
yeah, and of course, a reason to rejoice. And if we'll stop measuring, the miracle will start. And that one's a
Yeah.
classic too.
Uh,
Man, he worked that tape measure through that
he
whole
did.
sermon like he was a
He came.
professional carpenter.
He knew how to get the crowd's attention because he walks up there with a little brown paper sack, kind of just sits it on the
What I
pulpit.
have in this bag.
But I'll tell you another one that has ministered to me as much, if not more than the others, is in '91 he preached "Refuge from Despair,"
Yeah.
and I've heard him on during interviews say that after he preached that, he got home and I mean he had cancellations left and right for that year.
A refuge from despair should have been number 4 for me because you're right.
But people thought, he was going
Charismatic,
left, liberal
liberal.
because he preached grace.
And to be honest with you, whenever I first heard that message as a teenager,
Yeah.
I thought the exact same thing from the church culture that I was raised up in. I thought that was the biggest bunch of sloppy agape I ever heard in my life.
But he was on record by saying he got home and I mean there's cancellations left and right. But then the next year, to round out my point, was in '92 he came back and he preached the greatest need in the world.
I was just fixing to say that's an underrated.
Is to be right with God.
Yeah, that's an
So
underrated message as well.
he he gave him the left hook in 91, and then he came back with the right
The
hook
right
in
cross.
92. So, I mean,
What's it called? Balance.
yeah, I mean, there was about 30, 35 years where, even me and my dad have talked about it. And my dad was, he's evangelized for the UPC for several years. And he remembers when Brother Arnold kind of came on the scene and, hearing him at camps and conferences. And he said, son, there was about 30, 35 years where, he was almost untouchable.
Yeah.
As far as, revelation and content.
Oh yeah. My all-time favorite. And of course I have to exclude my father from any conversation about
Right.
my all-time favorite preachers. That's not fair. That don't
Right.
count. But outside of my father, Jeff Arnold is definitely my all-time favorite preacher.
Absolutely. Just his, and this goes back to your one of your opening statements. His delivery is not, I guess, preacher-esque. As far as going by an outline.
Yeah, it's not.
He just gets up there, and I mean, he just, he made a statement. He made a statement one year that I don't warm up. As soon as I start, I'm good. It's good.
That's right. That's right.
And he doesn't take time to build a foundation. I mean, he just comes out swinging.
If you're going to go with me, you're going to have to start with me.
Yeah, he starts hot. That's what he said.
Starts hot. That's right. And he does.
As soon as I start, it's good.
Yeah. He said, I'm about to hear my favorite preacher.
Well, he said numerous times that he's almost bought his own tape. So
yeah, exactly. Right. some of his classic lines while he's preaching is, hey, all of you up there in the cheap seats.
Yeah, all of you doing the mannequin impersonation.
Yeah. Said, all of you doing that statue impersonation, you better watch out, the pigeons are circling.
I tell you what, he didn't give the preachers a nod off, that's for sure.
No, all you baptized brains.
But we talk about all of his bot sermons, and rightfully so. I mean, they're just, like you said, miracle looking for a vessel, and refuge from despair, and come out of the cave. And even another one, in 99, he preached, I will not die in my dilemma.
That's an awesome message too.
And he, gave the testimony about his church trouble going through the building project and all that. And then in 2000, he came right back and he preached, to experience the dream, you got to survive the nightmare.
Yeah.
And that was a great one. But there's a lot of things that he has preached at his home church through the years.
Oh yeah, I've gotten that preaching series
that are
off the
just
charts.
Great.
Yeah, he taught a series on Abraham for
he did 27 weeks.
Yeah, phenomenal.
The steps of that great faith.
Yeah,
I listened to every one of them.
Do I?
I said I've listened to every one of them.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal series, and that is what people don't understand, is that the kind of preaching and teaching that he gave to his local church was them getting to hear Because of the Times week in and week out.
Right.
And we do get accustomed to like the Because of the Times like atmosphere and fervor, but he's an incredible Bible teacher. He has the ability not only to preach at that level of high energy, but he has the ability to get up and actually just take his time and teach the Bible. And it's incredibly phenomenal. And a lot of people don't know that side of Jeff.
No. That series was great. He also taught one, I think in 2016. I think I may have shared this with you sometime back, a oneness series, and he called it Finding Christ in Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think he taught it every Wednesday night during the month of December. And it's just, of course, he starts out with John 1:1. And I mean, he just, he spends 30, 40 minutes just on John 1:1.
Yeah.
And it was incredible as well.
Yeah. Just an absolutely um, um, world-changing ministry, and he's more than just a preacher. I think I think he's a prophet in a very biblical definition, not in the sense of prophesying future events, but a prophetic voice that spoke directly to the movement, directly to needs within the movement, issues that needed to be addressed that a lot of people wouldn't, a lot of ministries and preachers would not touch. And he did it fearlessly. He did it without any fear or favor whatsoever. And the refuge from despair message, like I said, when I first heard it, I thought it was just the biggest mess of compromise I ever heard in my life. But as
Yeah.
I've developed in my revelation of God and scripture and life, I come to realize that,
Yeah.
man, that message was,
Yeah. Life will teach you a lot of things. That's for
it
sure.
sure will. It sure will. And, as a young preacher, it's easy to get cocky about a lot of stuff you think you know until
Right.
life hits. And that's one of those messages that has aged well for me, because
Very well.
yeah, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And because of that, I think he might also hold the record for having been banned from the most districts in the UPC.
Well, he never shied away from making that known either.
Uh-uh.
He
No.
said, I think he was preaching at Texas, one of their camp meetings a few years back. And, classic Jeff Arnold. He said, "You guys don't intimidate me. I've been thrown out of the best districts this movement has to offer." That's, so,
I
but
believe it was,
that you knew that that's what you were going to get when
and
he
they
came.
knew it, but they, a lot of times,
Yeah.
they knew it before they invited him too, that it was likely to happen.
Yeah. You knew what you were signing up for.
And I think it was Illinois, perhaps Missouri, where one night he just turned the pulpit around backwards and preached to the district board for about an hour.
Yeah. And anybody else that would do that or would try to do that, they would be finished.
Yeah.
And, but which I guess they, tried to finish him too in certain districts, but he just kept coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Just,
I mean, it's like you said, he's one of a kind. And I've had the opportunity twice to sit down and talk to him.
yeah.
He preached our dedication service here in Mississippi for my home church back in 2011. And I had the unique responsibility, I guess, to pick him up from the airport. And man, I'm sitting there, and here he comes down the escalator. He's got this button-up Hawaiian shirt on.
Yeah.
Some wrinkled khakis, and he's got this notebook hanging out of his front pocket.
Yeah.
That he probably wrote, 3 sermons on the plane ride.
Yeah.
And man, it was amazing to see how he could, go from just talking to somebody young like me to the time that I picked him up from the hotel for the service. You could tell that the switch had been turned on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was,
and he was in preacher mode when I picked him up.
oh yeah. He was preaching to you all the way to the hotel.
Oh man, I got preached to for 25 straight minutes.
Yeah.
And so I met him then, and then actually 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in Florida in revival in Leesburg, and about an hour and 15 minutes south of Gainesville. And I was able to meet him again for lunch at one of his favorite Italian places.
Oh, I've been there.
And he's got to be pushing almost 80 now.
Yeah.
But
that mind of his is still 25.
Man, I know he had a lot of health problems, but that mind it's still sharp, man.
It is.
I just sat there and was like a sponge, trying to take in as much as I could.
I have a picture of him somewhere on my Instagram of me and him together, and he's in one of those short sleeve one piece mechanic Dickies outfits.
He actually had one of those on that day. I met him in Florida.
Yeah.
He had that on with an Israeli defense military jacket on.
One of the most eclectic
Yes,
guys, eccentric people to
but
a personal level.
but man, he's the impact he's had on people, man. It's just
Yeah.
you can't put a number on it.
No. He was preaching at Daniel McDonald's anniversary service. We preached it together. And it was
You
fun.
did with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was preaching and he was getting on something. And well, first of all, he turned to the presbyter and said, he said, I don't know where we come up with that dumb junk. That ain't in the Bible. So there ain't no presbyters in the Bible. And then he turned to Brother McDonald and said, you can keep your check. I make millions.
Yeah, I was a millionaire before I got here.
Yeah, I was a millionaire before I got here. Huh. He's like the Donald Trump of Pentecost. He don't need your money. So he's gonna say what he wants to say.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a place to preach every week. I don't need you, you know. But you know, through all of that, through
Yeah. There is a kind, gentle,
yes,
like incredibly loving heart underneath all of that pizzazz and
yeah, you get through that Brooklynese,
yeah,
you know, personality that he has. I mean, you can tell when he gets down to what he's preaching or talking about.
Yeah.
There's a real compassion and passion for, you know,
And probably
the church and God's kingdom. And
oh, absolutely. And probably the one that reveals that the most is a refuge from despair. You
yes,
could just hear his heart for people
yeah,
in that message. And it's phenomenal.
that's one of those sermons that, you know, he read out of First John. If our heart condemns us,
God is
God is
greater than
greater
our
than our
heart and
heart
knows
and
all
knows all
things.
things. I never read that verse the same way. I've never read it the same way since I've heard him preach that.
Yeah.
And it's just locked in my mind. Every time I read it or think about it, that whole sermon comes back.
Yeah, refuge from despair is one of those messages that absolutely everybody needs to hear.
Yeah, I am persuaded is a good one.
It is. I'm not an Egyptian wasn't because of the times, but that was
no, it was. And I'll tell you another one, and this goes back to his home church hearing him every week. I found one several months ago that he preached either in 2003 or 4 in January, kind of as a catalyst for that year for the church. Yeah. And he preached, our dreams must be greater than our memories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was just, and yeah, I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm like, this is a Sunday morning at his home church.
Yeah.
And this is the content that they're getting, you know. And it was
that church
is
definitely that church is definitely spoiled to highest level preaching and teaching.
Right.
And I never preached there, but I could only imagine how intimidating it would have been to try to preach in that pulpit, knowing the kind of content, quality of content.
For almost 40 years, however long it was he pastored, until he turned it over. And he's made statements that, he didn't counsel much. He didn't meet with a lot of people out of his church. He said, I felt like my responsibility was to pray and study. And he's also said that he has, he's never really had a lot of hobbies. At one time he liked to restore old cars.
Yeah.
But he said, I didn't have a lot of close friends. I didn't have a lot of hobbies. I just prayed and studied.
So his life has been
scripture.
And when when he preaches the Bible, you can tell that he has an intimate relationship with that
Yeah.
book, and he's best friends with that book.
Right. There was and I can't think of the uh, the gentleman's name, but he done a Barnabas blog for years. I think he's a minister in the UPC,
He is.
and he would go and interview, uh, certain preachers. He interviewed Scott Graham, J.H. Osborne. I think he interviewed like Ben Weeks and Doug White, but he went to Gainesville and interviewed Brother Arnold.
Yeah.
And Brother Arnold basically said, same thing that I just told you. I'd pray and study. And he had 2 or 3 spots in Gainesville that he would go to every day.
Yeah.
He'd go to Dickey's Barbecue. He'd go to that Italian place. And he said he'd sit in his little booth. And, for an hour, 2 hours there, he would read and study. And that was just his life.
And when he walks in that Italian restaurant, everybody in there bows down to him like he's the
oh yeah. Yeah, I realized
president.
that. I realized that a few weeks ago when I met him there. I mean, the owner came by 2 or 3 times and checked on him. 2 or 3 waiters and waitresses came by and made sure he had whatever he needed.
Yeah.
And, his impact has gone far beyond just the church and the pulpit.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, he's almost the godfather of Pentecost.
He is. He is. Man, it's just, and the amount of guys that have preached his sermons word for word and not giving him credit for them is amazing too.
Well, that's hard to do nowadays, especially.
It is, but it's still done. There's one that preached Miracle Looking for a Vessel, and it's on YouTube.
Yeah, you use the pizza box and everything.
Exactly. It's like, man, you got to know that Jeff Arnold's not just Pentecostals, man. There's people that watch Jeff Arnold.
Oh yeah,
and especially
from every denomination.
Exactly. So his influence goes well beyond, especially just oneness Pentecostalism. It goes
absolutely
well beyond the UPC, well beyond oneness Pentecostalism. It goes into every facet of Christianity. It's amazing.
I heard, and it relates to that gentleman you just said that preached the sermon. I heard that one of the more prominent Christian pastors for years would call Jeff Arnold's secretary every January.
Yeah.
And order every sermon that he preached the year before.
Yeah.
And would listen to it, study it, and
preach it.
And preach it. But, I can't say I blame him. If you're going to rip somebody off, you might as well rip off
the best.
Somebody that's very good.
Hey, if you're going to steal from the best.
If you're going to do it right. That's all I can say.
Well, because I don't have the full Zoom package, our interview is going to have to end in 9.5 minutes. So,
okay,
we're going to have to
start finding the landing strip.
Yeah, kind of find a place to land. By the way, your house looks amazing. I'm thankful the Lord bless you with a beautiful house.
It was
quite a project for a couple of years.
It took about, as far as building, about 9 months.
Okay.
Now, of course, the entire, picking out plans and all that, it was 1.5 years, probably almost 2 years. But
so
Lord's been good to us.
Yes, he has. So what's the best way to reach you if someone wants to schedule you to preach a revival?
Of course, I'm on social media, Facebook and Twitter. Adrian Sanford.
They can
88 is my Twitter handle. And then my name, of course, for Facebook. And
people can message you on Facebook.
they can. And
Awesome.
of course,
You can always, if you know me and you want to get a hold of him, you can get a hold of me and I'll give you his phone number.
you'll be my booking agent.
That's right. I only take 10% after you've been paid and tithed to your home church, and then I'll take
Okay.
another 10% for all the revivals I book for you.
Well, you know what, you get on that, and we can make that happen, buddy.
I have seriously done that for people before. That's hooked
Yeah.
me up. I've sent them
Well,
a cut.
you've definitely have been preaching for several years, and you know several circles. And do you want to share the funny story of how you and I met?
Yeah. So you were at Brother
or I could share it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was preaching that youth service at Brother Garza's church in Zanesville, Ohio. I guess probably 5 or 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
And now, to preface this, you've already mentioned that, I love listening to preaching, and so I'd heard you on audio several times through the years.
Yeah.
I'd heard your oneness sermons. I'd heard your even some of your debates. I'd heard you preach, "We are the church." You're going to serve somebody, which those are sermons that are worth stealing. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And so I'd heard you on audio. I'd never seen your face, didn't know what you looked like.
Yeah.
And so you came to that youth service that I was preaching at Brother Garza's.
Yeah.
And so he has all the ministers stand up. And of course he says, Brother Carol, but it never, light bulb doesn't go off.
Yeah.
And so long story short, we go out to eat after church. You come.
Was it at IHOP or somewhere?
It was at IHOP. And the more you're talking, it's like the light's slowly coming on.
Like a dimmer switch.
Yeah, it took me a minute. And finally, I just stop and say, "Wait a minute, are you the John Carroll from Louisiana?"
Yeah.
And man, you just busted out laughing. And I said, "Well, it's nice to meet you. I've heard you preach for years." And so awesome. I felt like an idiot.
No, that's awesome.
But man, I'm glad we met, and
yeah, me too.
We've stayed in contact ever since.
You preached our 1-year anniversary service last year.
I did,
and that was awesome. And
you've got a more permanent building now, right?
More permanent, but still not as we're still looking for something else as well. But the Lord really blessed us. We've added probably 4 families since we've been in this new building that and got out of the hotel. So
yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time to
absolutely
come on and talk about Jeff Arnold. I don't want his memory to die. I don't want his ministry to die. It's not going to, and I know I'm not going to be the one to keep it alive. It's going to do that on its own merits, but maybe someone will watch this and go check out some of those messages on YouTube from Because of the Times, and what he's preached is timeless, and there's always going to be somebody that's going to need a refuge from despair.
I go back and listen to it probably every 3 or 4 months.
Yep. And
because it's that relevant today.
Yeah, I thank God for his ministry. I appreciate your friendship, and thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Yes, sir.
All righty.